Hey there, welcome into the show. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. And by the time that you're watching this show, I hope everybody out there is having a fantastic weekend. Coming up here on the show, the Niners have made some big moves, some big changes and adjustments on the offensive side of the football, and hopefully that leads to a sustained running effort that is more successful with this Kyle Shanahan offense. Also on the back end of the show, we're going to take your questions for a mailbag. Before we get to all of that, don't forget to lock us in and hit that subscribe button. This is where it's at for the best Niners coverage every single day here on YouTube. We'll also be live for a Niners-Texans watch party on Sunday. We'll do a pregame show. We'll be live during the game, live after the game. Spend your Sunday with us, and I can't wait to see all of you there. Don't just subscribe, by the way. Turn on your notifications. Hit all. Therefore, anytime we push out a show like this, anytime we go live, you will be notified. So let's start here. It has been no secret that the 49ers rushing attack entering Sunday Night Football last week against the Falcons have been horrible. In fact, one of the worst in the entire NFL. 32nd in yards per carry going into that game, 30th in rushing yards per game. And Kyle Shanahan's offense historically has been known as a dynamic, physical running scheme. And that's what Shanahan's been able to hang his hat on, is that once that ground game gets going, it opens up the pass game, makes life easier for quarterbacks, and you're able to have this balanced offense, which is one of the more difficult offensive units to cover for defenses across the entire NFL. And from a physical standpoint, Christian McCaffrey all year has looked good. He's looked better than last year, when even before he got hurt and after the bilateral Achilles tendonitis, he was slow. He didn't have burst. He didn't have explosiveness. And he showed the after effects of leading the NFL in touches in 2023 when he won Offensive Player of the Year. But even with Christian McCaffrey looking good, looking healthy, and by the way, going into this week, he's 8th in the NFL in receiving yards, it's been hard for him to get going running the ball because so often he's gotten handoffs and he's immediately swarmed by not just one defender, multiple defenders, because the interior of this Niners offensive line has not been good run blocking wise, and they've been getting pushed back and bullied. And so Kyle Shanahan and the Niners have made two changes and big moves to change this running game. One was the return of George Kittle. That's from a health standpoint, of course. He came back on Sunday night against Atlanta, and his impact was felt. The other, which we'll get to here in a couple of minutes, Kyle Shanahan adjusting his scheme. What makes an elite coach an elite coach? Well, from an offensive standpoint, obviously it's play calling, it's play design, it's the scheme, but it's being able to make in-season and in-game adjustments. In-game, depending on how the opponent is defending you and guarding you and what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. During the season, it has to do a lot with scheme and personnel and your experiences with how your unit has fared. And so with the return of George Kittle, he comes back against Atlanta and immediately he transformed the Niners' ground game because he's an elite blocker. Defenses need to account for him as a blocker, but also as a pass catcher. And when he is to the right of the right tackle, to the left of the left tackle, it takes less pressure off the offensive line. And you can also use him as a motion man in a variety of ways, pass catching wise, but to also get the ground game going. He also lends assistance to all of the other offensive linemen because he's an additional blocker. And the Niners have struggled to find other tight ends when he's been out or has needed a rest who can block successfully, which makes his impact as a blocker even more felt. And so even though Kittle had only 2 targets against Atlanta and didn't have a catch, you don't just have to catch passes to make a difference. The Niners went into Sunday night as one of the worst rushing teams in the National Football League. They came out of it hopefully finding something. And they found something partially because Kittle was on the field. And check out these numbers. When Kittle was on the field, the Niners averaged 1.4 yards before contact per rush. They ran for 151 rushing yards as a team. Both of Christian McCaffrey's touchdowns when George Kittle was on the field in the red zone. Without Kittle on the field, the Niners' yards before contact, minus 2.1. And they only ran it 6 times for 12 yards. That is George Kittle putting his imprint on the game in a big, big way. And that's so important because this offense under Kyle Shanahan is at its best when it is balanced, when this run game is clicking, when this run game is humming. Kyle Shanahan has gone 17-7 with backup quarterbacks when his starters have been injured in his coaching career. That's insanely good. So many other coaches fail and flounder. And he's been able to have success with other quarterbacks because the Niners usually historically can lean on the ground game to make the job easier for the quarterback. And finally, last week, the Niners made the job easier for Christian McCaffrey. That's why he turned the clocks back to 2023. 24 carries, 129 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.4 yards per carry. And so hopefully the Niners can find something from that game on tape and obviously have it be effective for this week's game against Houston, but also beyond. The other thing, too, is that the Niners had some explosive runs. For the first time this year, they came in bunches. The first 6 games of the year, the Niners had 9 runs of 10-plus yards combined in the first 6 games. On Sunday Night Football, they had 8 runs of 10-plus yards in that game alone. And when it comes down to the scheme, the Niners' zone rushing percentage, meaning zone runs, has gone down the last 2 weeks. Weeks 1 through 5, they called zone runs 61.2% of the time. Weeks 6 through 7, that number dropped nearly 20% to 42.6%. The change is that the Niners ran more power, and the gap scheme was more prevalent than the zone running scheme. And so did the 49ers find something here? I've gotten this question from some viewers this week because we've talked about this at moments on the show. Chase, why did that lead to the Niners offensive line being successful? I think it allows them to just play more physical, less thinking, less movement, and they can play more north and south. And for Christian McCaffrey, it allows him to see hole, hit hole, get up and down the field, north and south more quickly instead of having to read and stretch things out on some of those zone runs, which can take some more time, and it gives defenses more time to identify where the run is going, what the play is, to shoot those gaps. We'll take your questions on the other side. But let's get to our sponsor for today's San Francisco 49ers Report, PrizePicks, making this show hum along. Get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. If you download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS. This is America's #1 fantasy sports app. Millions of users have signed up. You pick, predict, play. You can get your picks in less than 60 seconds. It's easy to play. All you have to do is choose more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win some big-time money. PrizePicks also has a couple of new features. It's the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Christian McCaffrey's rush yards, receiving yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on PrizePicks. You can also follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app, copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just somebody whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. Here's our 3-pick power play for Sunday. C.J. Stroud more than 200.5 passing yards, Christian McCaffrey more than 51.5 receiving yards, and George Kittle more than a half rushing or receiving touchdown. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right. Let's take some of your questions here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. So glad all of you are hanging out here with me. And I always enjoy opening up the floor and taking questions from our subscribers, our real ones, and the people who consistently watch this show. I know that you know ball, and this allows you to show me as we take your questions here on the program. So let's begin with this one coming in from Zypher. man, Jalen Phillips would be such a great option at the edge spot. Not going to lie. And obviously, you're talking about the Niners maybe making a trade for Jalen Phillips of the Miami Dolphins going into the NFL trade deadline. The Niners have been linked to him and other pass rushers going into the deadline after that injury to Nick Bosa. And I don't think the Niners can survive by not replacing Bosa and Fred Warner. I do think San Francisco can survive and be competitive if they replace Nick Bosa and then let some of these young linebackers play, because I do think there are some talented players at that linebacker spot, which brings me to this point, right? I think John Lynch needs to make a move for a pass rusher. And obviously Jalen Phillips is a really intriguing name. And he tore his Achilles last year. But I will say this about Phillips. I thought he put some really good reps on tape against the Cleveland Browns in Week 7, where he was able to generate some pressures, move the pocket, get to the quarterback. And physically, I thought he just looked really good. Of course, anytime you have a player with injury concerns, it's a concern for the Niners because they have their own injury problems that they need to worry about. But Jalen Phillips was getting off to a really impressive start in his career. 8.5 sacks in year 1. 7 sacks in year 2, 6.5 in year 3. And then he tore his Achilles in game 4 of last year. And then he came back in record time. And he's played in all 7 games this year, has 7 starts. He has 2 sacks, he has 2 TFLs, and he has 4 quarterback hits. I think he's starting to round into form. And this is also a player who is on an expiring deal, but fits what the Niners are looking for. A young player who can help them out in the future. I'm with you. I would really like to see him in a Niners uniform. Jeremiah Grady. What do you think about trading Jauan Jennings for Jauan Thibodeaux? So I don't think that's an equal trade if you're the New York Giants. Jauan Thibodeaux is a really good player. He's having a really good year. There's also this from a contractual standpoint. Jauan Thibodeaux has another year of contractual control and team control beyond this year in 2025 because the Giants exercise his 5th-year option. So he's going to be under contract for 2026 as well. Whereas Jauan Jennings is only under contract for 2025. He's going to be a free agent after this year. I also think when you think about player value and position value, edge rushers, so much more valuable than wide receivers. It's so much harder to find a premium pass rusher compared to a premium wide receiver because wide receivers in the NFL draft, they're not easy to find, but in this era of a bunch of 7-on-7s and a lot of kids growing up not wanting to be running backs, instead wanting to be wide receivers because of the physical toll at running back. I mean, there are so many gifted wideouts now who are entering the draft year in, year out. And then lastly, with Jennings, he's really injured. I mean, this year he's dealt with knee, ankle, and rib injuries, whereas Thibodeaux has been pretty healthy. Now, if the Giants do lose against the Philadelphia Eagles, that will drop them to 2-6 this year, and that effectively ends their season as far as wanting to be a playoff contender. But it was never about 2025 for the Giants. They're trying to build for the future. I think they look at Thibodeaux as a building block. I really like him as a player. I would make this move if I could make the move and decision. You know, Thibodeaux in year 1, 4 sacks, year 2, 11.5. Last year in 12 games had 5.5. This year, 2.5 sacks, 5 TFLs, 8 quarterback hits. He's been pretty active. He's been lining up at defensive end, at defensive tackle. The Niners like to use their defensive ends in that manner, but I just don't think the Giants would make this move because it's not equal value. VC Nick, $2. Just play Oku, 5 quarterback pressures and 1 sack against Atlanta. So you're talking about Sam Okuwanu, who has a pretty fascinating story. And he really started to turn my attention toward him last year. You know, he had been a journeyman up until that point, but last year he really started to make some plays. He was with the Titans in 2022, did not play in the NFL in 2023. With the Niners last year, he played 16 games with 3 starts. He had 3 sacks. This year, he has 1 sack. He did have those 5 pressures against Atlanta. Against Tampa Bay, he wasn't great. I like him, too, for his positional versatility. He could play defensive end. He could play defensive tackle. Now, I don't want you to get fooled by his performance against Atlanta leading you to believe that he should be an every down player or a starter. I think he's perfect being a rotational player who gives you positional versatility. Went to Maryland, undrafted in 2022, looked as though he wasn't going to find a consistent job at the NFL level. I think he's turned himself into a very solid backup defensive end who, again, can play defensive tackle, and he's made some really wild plays for the Niners the last couple of years. RESP. Any thoughts about us trading for a corner, especially with Renardo Green struggling and his injuries? So I've seen a lot of people in the chat saying slanderous things about Renardo Green. And he has been banged up this year. I will give you that. He had the neck. Now he has the toe. But the toe isn't expected to be a long-term injury. And he's expected to potentially be able to play on Sunday against Houston. Of note, I'm recording this show on Thursday, so that could change over the next couple of days. I know his PFF numbers aren't great, but this year, can you point to a bunch of plays where Renardo Green has gotten beat? I can't really. I think he's been a pretty steady player on the outside. And I think he's been a pretty good number 2 option opposite of Deommodore Lenoir. You think about this Niners team, it's not like they're getting gashed in the pass game with awful cornerback play. They've been a pretty consistent team at all 3 levels, and Renardo Green has been a part of that. Now, his coverage grade, according to PFF, is only 42.8. That does rank 106th among 112 corners. Obviously, that's not good. One of the worst numbers in the NFL. But he does have 3 pass breakups. That ranks 17th. Passer rating allowed, 67.5. He's only given up 12 catches this year. So I actually think he's been a pretty solid player. He was struggling a little bit during the spring and summer, and I think he's dealing maybe with a little bit of a sophomore slump, but he's definitely a starting caliber corner. Now, would I trade for a corner? I do think the depth there at that position isn't phenomenal, but honestly, I kind of like what Darrell Luter Jr. was able to do against Atlanta. But if one of your starters went down, the depth really isn't there. So that does concern me. Chua, what is up, Chua? How can we stop the Texans defense? So this is going to be difficult. The Texans offense stinks. And it's the scheme. It's the play calling. CJ Stroud has really regressed. Their offensive line is not good. I will say this about their defense, though. They have a really good defense. And they have one of the best edge rusher tandems in the NFL with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. They can cause a lot of havoc. They also have some really physical defensive tackles. And we saw how Vita Vea was able to take over the game along the interior against this Niners interior offensive line. And Mac Jones had a long day. The Niners couldn't run it because Vita Vea dominated the interior. And the Texans have an opportunity to really control the game from their defensive line. Derek Stingley is an excellent corner. So I want to see the Niners continue to run gap runs and power runs and do less of the zone runs, which has led to a lot more success on the ground for San Francisco. A trademark for Mac Jones and Kyle Shanahan this year has been getting rid of the ball quickly to negate the pass rush, and that has helped them because of their offensive line struggles in pass protection. And so I think that's a pretty good formula for the Niners to take down that Texans defense and score some points. Jeremiah Grady, do you think Mike McDaniel will be in San Francisco next year as the offensive coordinator? I don't think so. Here's why. And Kyle Shanahan was with Mike McDaniel going all the way back to their Texans days. And McDaniel followed him every step of the way. And so they've known each other for a really, really long time. They are both on that Texans staff. And Shanahan was the receivers coach in 2006, quarterbacks coach in 2007, and then the OC 08-09. And I believe McDaniel may have been there 08-09. But then McDaniel followed Shanahan to Washington when Shanahan was the Redskins offensive coordinator. Then they went with one another to the Cleveland Browns because Shanahan was the OC there in 2014. McDaniel followed Shanahan to the Falcons and then followed him to the Niners. But here's why I don't think McDaniel would come back to the Niners. Kyle Shanahan's always going to call plays. That's what he does. That's what he enjoys doing. And he's damn good at it. Mike McDaniel will have an opportunity to go somewhere He'll have an opportunity to call plays as an offensive coordinator. And it wouldn't surprise me if a team makes him one of the highest paid offensive coordinators in the NFL. Because early in his tenure with Miami, Tua was playing really well, and I think that Tua is completely mid. We're seeing that now. And Mike McDaniel clearly has lost the locker room. I don't think he's head coaching material. Maybe at some point he gets another chance. But he's not going to need to prove himself a little bit as an OC first. And the league is always looking for great offensive minds. And so I think McDaniel goes somewhere where he can call plays, have full autonomy of the offense, and get highly paid to do it. Tyler, could they trade away Mac Jones to a team in desperate need of a quarterback for high draft capital? The Niners better not do that, because we have seen the value that a backup quarterback can bring. Can you imagine what the Niners would look like if Joshua Dobbs or Brandon Allen had to start 5 games? The season would be over, and it's not even the end of October. With Mac Jones, they're in it because he's gone 4-1. He's played really well, and he leads the NFL in passing yards per game. And the Niners got him on a 2-year deal worth less than $9 million. Great value as far as the contract, great impact as far as the player. I'm not trading him away. And I'm not trading him away after the year, because Purdy's also been pretty injury prone. He missed time in 2024, missing a lot of time here in 2025, and Mac Jones allows you to stay afloat, be competitive, and be a threat in the NFC. I value the quarterback position too much to trade away a player like that. Now, they do like Curtis Rourke, but he's not ready to be the backup for this team. Who you got on Sunday? It's a do-or-die game for Houston and a big one for San Francisco. Type SF for the Niners, HOU for the Houston Texans. Let me know who you're rolling with, and I hope to see you there for our watch party.